Well, what kind of man was this now dead Lee Harvey Oswald? Harry Reasoner tells us about the accused assassin in this report recorded just before Oswald's death.
Who is Lee Harvey Oswald, who was shot today? This man who Dallas police say killed John F. Kennedy. We don't know the whole story. We may never know the whole story. But we do know that his big passion in life was politics, leftist politics. One man who debated him in New Orleans says that Oswald spouted communist propaganda like a machine. When the subject changed, Oswald was less sure of himself. He faltered. He groped for words. Physically, a fairly ordinary man, a firm jaw, regular features, straight black hair. He was born in New Orleans in 1939. His father died just before he was born. He was the youngest of 3 children. The Oswald family moved several times in the next few years, first to Fort Worth, Texas, then to New York, and in 1953 back to New Orleans. They lived first on this block on French Street, a neighborhood of neat little houses on a broad street. An aunt lived nearby. Oswald was enrolled at Beauregard Junior High School, and his records there indicate that he was a poor student, making his best grades in art courses and civics. Just before he graduated from junior high, the family moved to Exchange Place in the old French Quarter of New Orleans. This is a short, run-down street. He and his mother occupied a small apartment over a pool hall. The rest of the street is dotted with bars, a barber shop, a novelty store. At about the same time, Oswald filled out a personal history sheet in school. He said he had 2 brothers, but he listed no names. He said he was a Lutheran, but he listed no church where he attended. He said he planned to enter the military service or to become a draftsman. He liked reading and outdoor sports, especially football. One question asked if he had any personal friends. He said no. Oswald was only enrolled in Easton High School for about a month when the family moved back to Fort Worth, Texas. But several girls, now married women, who attended junior high school with him, remember him.
He was just very, very quiet and kept to himself. He was in my homeroom, but I don't remember much about him because he wasn't very personable. He didn't seem to get along with everybody, talk a lot.
Benny, he did best in civics and art while he was at Beauregard, and we a lot of times associate an artist with a nonconformist, a person who doesn't dress or act like other people. Did this kind of fit the description of Lee Oswald?
Yes, it did. He was kind of like, well, he was like an oddball. He just didn't mix with other kids in school.
Do any of you ever remember him having any difficulties in class with any of his teachers? Did he seem to get along with all of his teachers, or was he a belligerent person in class? Did he argue with teachers?
No, he more or less kind of wanted to do things for him. Don't you think he was that type of...
What I remember, I mean, he was a good student and wasn't a troublemaker. He seemed more like a bookworm.
Yeah.
Well, he mentioned also in his history record that he liked to read a lot. Did he carry a lot of books? Did you ever notice him carrying a lot of books, more books than other students, for example?
No, just the usual books to take to class.
There have been a couple of people in the city who knew Lee Oswald after he grew up, when he came back to New Orleans, and they said that they almost immediately knew that it was Lee Oswald who had assassinated the president. I realize that at 14 years old, it's probably a little early to form an opinion, but did the Lee Oswald that attended Beauregard Junior High seem to be the type of person who would commit such an act?
No, but like they say, that's the ones you have to watch, the quiet ones, and you don't know what they're going to do. He didn't seem like it then. I can never remember him just laughing or smiling. He always just sort of smirked, like a tight lip.
By all accounts, Oswald was a loner. He himself said he had no close friends. The girls didn't remember anyone who was particularly close to him. But there was one young student, Ed Voebel, who went out of his way to befriend Oswald, and he tells about it.
Would you tell us your first encounter, as you can recall? This has been in what, about 8?
It was about 8 years ago.
8 years ago. Tell us about it.
Well, he came in Beauregard's mid-semester, and he had a fight with a couple of boys, and that's how I first saw him. And after the next day, someone had punched him in the mouth that Oswald didn't know, I didn't know, and I don't think the boy even knew him. I think these boys that he had a fight with him put this other guy up to punch him in the mouth to get back at him, because Oswald did beat the other boys. And Oswald was laying down on the ground, and I ran up to him, and I think a couple other boys did too, and we brought him back into school and washed his mouth off and put some cold compresses on his mouth.
And this is more or less the start of a friendship between you and Oswald at that time?
Well, that's when we first met, was when this happened.
And what type of boy was he at 15? I understand this was about the age of that year.
Well, he didn't seem to mix too well with the rest of the boys or the girls, anyone there at the school. He didn't seem to have any friends, or he didn't seem to be really interested in anything. He didn't participate in any extracurricular activities. He was just a loner, it seemed like.
I'll tell you, one reason I'm concerned about the age of 15, this reportedly is when Oswald first became interested or came in contact with the Marxist theory. Now, did he, at any time during your relationship with him, did he mention anything about his readings of leftist or Marxist literature?
No, he didn't mention anything at all about any politics or socialism, communism, Marxism, or anything, and I don't believe that's true. I don't believe he had any really basic ideas on Marxism or anything at 15 years old. I think that came later, somewhere along the line, because he never mentioned anything like that to me at all.
Now, in talking earlier, before this interview, you mentioned you had been to his house. Could you tell us a little about his home life? Well,
he, when I knew him, he lived in Exchange Alley. I think it was 126 Exchange Place or Alley. It was a small apartment, and it lived above the pool rooms, and in that area there's nothing but pool rooms and bar rooms, and it's sort of almost a skid row. It's a very bad neighborhood.
Well, this was before or after his father died?
Oh, his father, from what I understand, died when he was very young, and this was after. I think he had moved to Texas after his father had died. His mother had brought him to Texas. Then he came back here again, and this was his second time in New Orleans.
And he sort of, as I understand it, sort of blamed the world for his problems. Isn't that what you mentioned earlier?
Well, it seemed that way to me after. At the time, I didn't have any basic opinions why he was a little different than most of us. It didn't enter my mind at all. I sort of liked him because he wasn't exactly the general run-of-the-mill that I had known at school. He was a little above them. He seemed to be, at least, even though he came from a poor family, let's say, and he wasn't exactly a ruffian. He just had a little something about him that was just a little different from the average ruffian that I'd known at that school.
Oswald returned to New Orleans in May of this year. In the interim, he had served in the Marine Corps with a bad record. He had also gone to Russia, where he announced that he was going to become a Russian citizen, but he then changed his mind and returned to this country with a Russian wife. He, his wife, and their small child rented an apartment on Magazine Street in New Orleans. And Oswald apparently devoted a good deal of time to the New Orleans chapter of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, a pro-Castro organization of which he was local chairman. Last August 16th, Oswald and an unidentified young man distributed pamphlets promoting the Fair Play for Cuba Committee on a New Orleans street corner. Not too many people seemed interested. A week before, Oswald got into a fight with 3 Cuban exiles because of the leaflets and was charged with disturbing the peace. He listed his occupation at the time as mechanic, and he was released after paying a $10 fine. At about this time, Oswald sent his wife and young child to live with his mother in Texas. Then, in the middle of the night, he himself left, leaving unpaid a half-month's rent. His movements since then are not known to us until Friday morning, when it is known that he was in the building from which the fatal shots were fired at John F. Kennedy.